Welcome to video number 2. If you haven't done video number 1, I suggest that you go back to video 1. This is a continuation of video 1, neutral spine. We're talking about the last piece that fits on the spine that we're talking about. And the rib cage is changed through our breath in our method. So I'm going to just show on Gus the rib cage. Mine is fixed with a little bit more meat on it than Gus's, but it's easier to see on him. And I'm holding 2 balls. One is deflated, and that represents a lung. We've got a lung inside the rib cage on each side, and then we have the diaphragm underneath. And when we inhale and we expand our rib cage and our diaphragm comes down, what happens is as those lungs fill up, and these muscles, there's webbing in between all the ribs that help us breathe. When our lungs fill up, it opens this up. So the ribs move, and the ribs come around to the side, and they attach onto the back of our spine. And it's important to breathe in all 360 of the rib cage because we want to be breathing into the whole part of the rib cage when we inhale. So our breath is lateral. In the reform method, we're opening up the rib cage and breathing out to the sides and into the back as we breathe. So more like, if you think of the rib cage as a bucket, we're breathing into the handles of the bucket rather than into the front of the body, moving the whole spine as we breathe. The head in the neutral place, chin, forehead, pelvis in the neutral place, and now going to the ribs. The goal of the breathing is to get the low ribs as close to the mat as you can without moving the pelvis or the head. Take your hands, hold on around your rib cage. Thumbs are at the back and your fingers are at the front. And now picture Gus's ribs. Think about your rib cage 360. As you breathe in, we're going to breathe in through our nose, smelling the room. And as you blow out through your mouth, you're going to feel your rib cage change. And again, breathing in through your nose, and then out through your mouth. If your ribs are too high, when you try and drop your rib cage, you're going to feel that your head wants to roll up, your chin's going to lift up. If you have forward head posture and your head is up, when you're lying down on your back, you're going to find your rib cage lifts high. So to fix that, put something underneath your head, a hand towel rolled up. Your head will be a little bit higher than your rib cage, but this will enable you to drop your ribs more easily. So again, taking those hands around the rib cage and picture yourself breathing into your back. Breathing into the back of the rib cage as you smell. And then as you breathe out, allowing your breastbone to soften, your rib cage to close as you push the air out. Let's do that again. Smell the room. Blow out a candle. That's step 1 of the mechanics of the breath, to get the rib cage to drop. So now that the 3 circles are placed in their neutral position down on the mat, the key of this is to keep them in their neutral place while we move our limbs, or from our 4 ball and socket joints, our shoulders and our hips. For instance, if your core is not staying engaged when you pick your leg up, the force of that, or the momentum, is going to take your spine in and out of its neutral place. And what that does is creates a sore low back or a sore neck when you leave the classes. So it's really important that you're keeping your core, your powerhouse, strong while you're doing those exercises, so that your ball and socket joints have the ability to move freely while your spine is staying neutral. And we do this through the breathing. The breathing is what's keeping those curves in their neutral position while you're moving your arms and your legs. So you'll find here it's very easy to keep the neutral spine because you're not moving. Let's test this now. Let's test the lower part to make sure that we're keeping our core, our powerhouse nice and strong while we move the leg inside of the joint. So we're going to do this movement with breath, keeping in principle to everything we do in the Reform method. We breathe as we move. As you inhale and smell the room, you're going to float your left knee up into a tabletop position. As you exhale, you're going to feel the mechanics of the breath. So you feel that on about count 1. Okay, I have my core. My powerhouse is strong. And now I move my leg back down on the mat. Let's try it on the other side. Inhale, filling the lungs. The leg floats up. As we exhale, count 1. We make sure our powerhouse is strong. And we lower our foot back down. Without using our powerhouse, you'll see that the momentum or the weight of my leg changes the curve of my back. This is dangerous if done with a lot of weight. For instance, lower leg lifts. I see some people do this and their back is arching, their neck is working, and their abs are popped right out. So we don't want to do that. We want to train our core through our breathing. Now let's test the upper ball and socket joints, our arms. So same principle applies here. As you breathe in, you're keeping your core engaged. So you don't want to go so far that your rib cage lifts. So how far can you go without your ribs moving? And then as you start your exhale on count 1, you feel your ribs start to pull down. Once your powerhouse is engaged, you finish the movement with the rest of the breath. And I'm going at about a 4 count. Let's do that again. I'm going to inhale. Start my breath out first. And float my arms up. And then once we start to get really tricky, we're going to move different ball and socket joints. So here's a pattern of walking as we inhale. And then as we exhale, feeling our powerhouse engaged, we bring our limbs down. Let's do the other side so we're balanced. And then breathe out. And lower. And if I do this incorrectly, it looks like this. My shoulder lifts, my back arches, I start to shift my weight from side to side, and I come up. So I've got tension in my joints, and if there's tension there, they can't roll. The ball can't roll well in the socket. Thereby, you lose your form, so the movement is done incorrectly and you're not getting the benefit of the workout the same way. So once you have this movement, then you start to add resistance. So it's really important that you get those movements correctly before putting any weight on top of it. So if you put weight on top of a faulty movement pattern, you're going to get more injury and you're going to get it quicker. So I'm going to demonstrate the wrong way. Here, if I'm putting weight, or let's say I'm doing now I've got 5 pounds plus incorrect movement patterns there. So again, correct form, feel my 3 circles in their neutral place. I feel my shoulders relaxed, and I reach. Start the breath to engage the powerhouse. Okay, so now I'm in neutral here. I've got my hands underneath my shoulders, and I'm thinking about the 3 circles that attach onto the spine. So I've got the back of my head in line with my upper back. I'm looking down through my hands, maybe a couple inches in front of me. My knees are underneath my hips. I've got a natural arch in my low back. And I'm just going to demonstrate what we see most of the time, which is the ribs pushing out like this again. So again, we don't want to fix our ribs by fixing our hips or our pelvis. So we want to keep our pelvis where it is. We've got our abdominals pulled in, and we're going to close the low ribs now through the breath. As we inhale, we expand. And as you breathe out, pulling your low ribs up off the floor. Now our core or our powerhouse is engaged, so we're free to move through our joints, our hips, or through our shoulders. And if we really want to take it up a notch, we do opposite sides, but notice the curves of the back don't change. If you're not exhaling when you're doing the moves, especially when they get really hard and there's weight attached on it, something's going to stabilize your spine, and it will be, usually it's the neck or it's your hip flexors here, fronts of the hips. So we want to make sure that when we do a movement, we're breathing out so we can engage our powerhouse so that our joints move easily. The number one question that I think I'm asked is, how do I know when to inhale or exhale? And this is what I answer. When you're inhaling, you're trying to create space or stretch. That's a good general rule. When to exhale is when you're going to work. When you need your powerhouse and you need your core most engaged, when you're exhaling. And that's for our method. So that's not a question, what am I doing when I'm powerlifting? That's a totally different thing. But at Reform, when you're working or when you need to pull load, you need to brace against something, and that's your abdominals. So when you're working, the answer is simply, when you're working, you're exhaling. So a general rule when breathing is when you're inhaling, you're lengthening or stretching, and when you're exhaling, you're working. Let me show you with an example is lunge one. So we're facing the front of the room, your right foot is on the platform, your left leg is going to move the carriage. What's happening in lunge one is as you go down, this is opening, and you're coming down into a squat in that right leg. As you exhale, you need power to come back up. So as you breathe out, your abdominals come in on count one, and then you start to press down through your right heel, bringing this leg in. If you don't do that, what we see sometimes is down like this, and then a pull up of this leg on a breath out. So again, you're inhaling to open this side, and now we're going to work to bring it back up on this leg. As you breathe out, you stand up on your right leg. So in the movement, as you go down, you're filling up your lungs to a 4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to feel that. As you start to exhale, so we're pausing for a second to feel count 1 of the abs coming in. Once the abs are in, we finish 2, 3, 4. Pause. Inhale. Start the exhale. And come up. So it's your core that initiates it, and you're pulling against that as you come up. A general rule, you want to start exhaling. Let's say the count is 4. As we inhale for 4, we start to exhale for 4. So that's our count. Now we're adding movement to it. As you start to exhale, you want to feel brace first. That's count 1. Okay, I've got my powerhouse in. Now I can recruit my other muscles and come up with the rest of the movement. If I go out and I just start to come back up, that's momentum, and then my breath tries to catch up. The breath is the leader, the movement is following. What happens when you breathe needs to be subconscious, and I tell all the private clients this, it needs to be as subconscious as picking up your toothbrush. You should be breathing all the time. If you're trying to learn new movements, and where am I breathing and what are the mechanics that are happening, is too many thoughts for your brain to hold at one time. I would suggest everybody practice breathing and what's happening in your core. You're going to strengthen your core. The breathing works from the inside out. You're going to feel stronger. All of these muscles in here that are your powerhouse, the core muscles, are your breathing muscles. They're the same thing. You will strengthen your core through the breath. The best thing that you can do is start with a TRM1. You could also do a private if you wanted to, but the way that you can do it on your own, especially taking this time while we're all at home, is breathing and getting those breath muscles strong. Then go to a TRM1. It works your core while moving your ball and socket joints. So we're moving in here while keeping the core braced. Then you would move on to a TRM2. If you go too quickly into the 2s or the 3s and you don't have this, you don't have the core strength, the powerhouse strength from the breath, or you're adding weight to faulty movement patterns, you're not going to get the benefit that you would get from the method, and you're not going to get, and you may get injured in the process. And once we have neutral spine, where we have the head and the ribs and the pelvis on the right place of the spine, of the curve, we have set the distance for the core. So the core, in the reform method, how we use core is the space from the bottom of your breastbone to your pubic bone and the sides of your ribs, this diamond. We call it our powerhouse or our core. Your powerhouse muscles are your breathing muscles. Your core muscles are your breathing muscles. And so what I've shown really quickly, and not getting into too much anatomy, is this is the diaphragm that sits at the top of the diamond. This is the pelvic floor, the other purple, that sits just below the diaphragm. And these are your transverse abs, your deepest layer of abs. If you put your hands on your hip bones and you just go inside your hip bones a couple inches and push way down, you will feel nothing really. They're not doing anything. But if you cough, they stick out. That's this blue band. They do two things. They push out, and then the back follows, it curves, or they pull in, which is how we want to do it, and that's what keeps the back protected. These are breathing muscles. These are powerhouse muscles. You've got all sorts of other abdominals that come across. You've got your side abs, your external obliques on each side. You've got your internal obliques from the hips. They make an X across your front. And then you've got your rectus abdominis, your 6-pack or your 8-pack ab. That runs from the bottom of the breastbone to the pubic bone. Now, if you engage that muscle, which a lot of people do when they're working out and they tighten it, it has a function. It pulls your ribs to your hips or your hips to your ribs, and then you change the distance in your powerhouse. It changes the whole neutral spine. So all that this 6-pack ab does is it stays nice and open through the front of your core. We're using the deep layer of muscles, the powerhouse, the breathing muscles, to keep the core engaged, to keep the 3 circles in their neutral place on the spine. The other muscles, the obliques, which you'll see in the mermaid and stuff, they move the body. These stabilize or support the spine. They don't have a function to move. They assist in moving, but they are not movers. So this ties in with the breath, why the breath is important. Before any of these movers or your ball and socket joints move, you want to make sure that this is engaged first. And that is your count 1 on your breath. So as I showed you in lunge 1, before you go to recruit all the other muscles that are working, you want to make sure that this is engaged. First, count 1, then recruit the rest of the muscles. So this is always your 1 count, making sure that you have this in. And that's why the breathing is so important. When you exhale, okay, now I've got my core, my powerhouse is engaged, now I work. The reason we developed the reform method the way we did and why breathing is so key, and you'll hear all of our teachers say, breathe, breathe, breathe. Why it's so important is because once you feel those muscles working, the rest of your body will be able to move better. and you'll be able to move better in all that you do. So if these muscles are working through your breath, these are postural muscles. They keep you upright. If you're not using those to stabilize your spine and to hold your posture strong while you're working, or while you're standing, or while you're sitting, there's going to be other compensations. If you engage your six-pack ab while you're working, you would be doing this while you're standing up. So you don't want to be doing that, because we're already forward in what we're doing at our desk. If you stand like this with your knees locked and those deep abs pushed out, you're going to feel tension in your low back, or you're going to get tension in your neck. It's taking you way out here. So those powerhouse muscles or core muscles help set your spine up straight so that the rest of the body can move better.